Chapter 1. 2 Tickets.
Gabriel had a kind face and intelligent brown eyes. He usually had a friendly smile, but there was no smile on his face today. He wasn't happy. "I'd like to be as rich as Marco," he thought, "but I'm only good old Gabriel. Sylvia likes me. I know she does. She thinks I'm kind and nice, but she thinks I'm boring too. Boring old Gabriel, that's me." Gabriel had 2 tickets for a film. There was a red rose on the table in his sitting room. He took the rose and the tickets and went out. An hour later, Gabriel arrived at the door of Sylvia's flat. When she opened the door, she didn't smile at him. "Oh, hello," she said. "What, Don't you remember, Sylvia?" said Gabriel. "It's Sunday evening. We're going to the cinema. I've got the tickets. It's that great new film. You said—" "What do you mean?" said Sylvia. "I can't go out with you this evening. I'm busy. I don't remember." "But I called you on Thursday," Gabriel said. "You wanted to come." Sylvia pushed her beautiful dark hair out of her eyes. She didn't look at Gabriel. "Oh dear," she said. "That was stupid of me. I'm really sorry. Please don't be angry, Gabriel. Come back tomorrow. We'll go to the film tomorrow." She began to shut the door. "Sylvia," Gabriel said angrily, "you're going out with Marco. I know you are. I want to tell you something about Marco. He's rich, but he's a bad man. You're being stupid, Sylvia." He stopped. Sylvia wasn't there. "I'm talking to the door," he thought angrily. He looked at the rose in his hand. Then he threw it onto the ground. Behind him, he heard a quiet laugh. He turned. There was a man on the stairs. His clothes were expensive, and there were 20 red roses in his hand. It was Marco. "Oh dear, Gabriel," Marco laughed. "Is she busy tonight? Doesn't she want to go out with you? I'll try now. Perhaps she'll go out with me." Gabriel didn't answer. He walked quickly away and went down to the street. It was a hot Sunday evening. There was no wind. A lot of people were in the street. They sat in the parks and drank in the cafes. Young men and women talked and laughed. Gabriel didn't want to look at them. He felt too unhappy. He took out the 2 tickets. "I paid for them," he thought, "and it's a wonderful film. I'll go without her. I'm not going to think about Sylvia Delgado. I'll go and see the film and I'll enjoy it." The Plaza Cinema was a big, old building in the centre of town. The doors weren't open, so there were a lot of people outside. Gabriel waited with them. When the doors opened, people went quickly inside to the ticket office. But Gabriel had his ticket so he waited outside. It was 8:27 p.m., and at that minute the earthquake happened.
Chapter 2. A Table for Two.
Marco stood at the door of Sylvia's flat and watched Gabriel leaving. He looked carefully at his clothes and his shoes. Why didn't Sylvia open the door? She was in there. Then, suddenly, it opened. "Sylvia, dear," Marco said, "you look wonderful." He stopped. Sylvia didn't look wonderful. Her face was red and she looked unhappy. Gabriel said something to her, Marco thought. What was it? That young man doesn't like me, and I don't like him. He followed Sylvia into the sitting room. "I'm nearly ready," she said. "Have a drink. I'll come in a minute." Marco knew the Delgados' sitting room well. He went to the table and got a drink. Then he sat down in an expensive armchair. He liked the flat. There were beautiful pictures on the walls, and everything in the room looked very expensive. Sylvia lived with her mother. Her father was dead. Before he died, Mr. Delgado had a good job. He had cars and friends and a lot of money. But the Delgados weren't a rich family now, and Sylvia's mother was ill. The doctor often came and visited her. Sometimes Mrs. Delgado had to go to hospital. She had to have good food and expensive medicines. The Delgados didn't have much money now. Marco didn't know about the Delgados' money. He saw their pictures, their jewellery, and other expensive things, and he liked them all. "Sylvia," Mrs. Delgado called weakly from her bedroom. "Are you there, dear? What are you doing? Is somebody with you? Who is it?" Marco heard Sylvia's answer. "It's all right, Mother," she said. "It's only Gabriel. We're going to see a film." Ah, thought Marco. So Mrs. Delgado doesn't like me. Mrs. Delgado likes dear Gabriel. He went back to the table and had another drink. Perhaps you don't like me, Mrs. Delgado, Marco thought. But your daughter does. Oh, yes, she likes me very much. He smiled. 10 minutes later, Sylvia came into the room again. Her dark hair was beautiful. Her big brown eyes were excited. Her dress was very pretty. She smiled happily. "Hello, Marco," she said. "I'm ready now." He put down his glass and stood up. "We're going to have a wonderful, wonderful evening," he said. Outside it was very hot. Marco drove his car fast. Sylvia felt the wind in her hair. It was good. Gabriel hasn't got a car, thought Sylvia. She turned and looked at Marco. "Where are we going?" she asked. "I'm taking you to the Oasis restaurant," Marco said. "It's the best restaurant in town. It's very expensive, of course, but nothing is too good for you, Sylvia. I know a lot of girls, but you're the most beautiful. The Oasis restaurant was 2 kilometers outside the town. There were a lot of big cars outside it. Marco pushed open the doors. Inside it was nearly dark. There were pretty little lights on the tables, and a man played quiet music. Some people danced. "Good evening, sir," the manager said to Marco. "I called this afternoon," said Marco. "I want a table for 2. "Of course. Please follow me," the manager said. Marco and Sylvia followed him to the back of the restaurant. Their table was near the door to the kitchen. Waiters went in and out with food and drink. Marco looked at the manager angrily. "I don't want this table," he said. "We're going to dance later. We want to be near the dancing. I have to have a better table." "I'm sorry, sir," said the manager. "I can't do that. We're busy this evening. Come early next time, then I can put you near the dancing." He began to walk away. "Wait a minute," said Marco. "I'm not happy with this. You've got to—" "I'm very sorry," said the manager again. "I can't give you a better table now. Later, perhaps." "But—" said Marco. People began to turn round and look at Marco. Sylvia looked at the floor. Marco always did this. He always wanted the best place in the restaurant, in the theatre, or at the football game. Sylvia put her hand on Marco's arm. "This table's okay," she said. "I don't want to change. Why?" "Be quiet, my dear," said Marco. "Leave this to me." He turned back to the manager. "Now," he said, "you listen to me." Everybody's watching us now, thought Sylvia. She caught his arm again. "I'll see you in a minute," she said. "I'm going to the washroom." She walked between the tables to a door at the other end of the restaurant. She saw young men and women dancing. Older people laughed and talked. They all looked happy. The washroom was outside the restaurant in a small garden. Sylvia opened the door and walked into the garden. It was 8:27 p.m. and at that minute the earthquake happened.
Chapter 3. Sylvia's Story.
The ground moved under Sylvia's feet. "Help! What is it? What's happening?" she thought. There was a terrible noise, and she looked up into the sky. Perhaps the noise and the shaking came from a plane. Suddenly, the lights went out and it was nearly dark. Then people started to scream. Sylvia didn't move. She couldn't move. "It's an earthquake," she thought. "Oh no, please no." The ground moved again. A long crack started to run up from the bottom of the wall in front of her to the top. Then the wall opened, and Sylvia could see the people inside the restaurant. They tried to run. Their screams were terrible. She could see hands pushing and pulling. She could see their faces and their eyes. They were terribly afraid. Then the wall fell and the roof came down. Sylvia couldn't see the faces and hands now. The Oasis restaurant wasn't there. It was only rubble. Sylvia couldn't move. She couldn't scream. Marco's in there, she thought. Marco and the manager and those people, they... Oh, I can't. I don't. There was another loud noise behind her. Sylvia turned. Another building fell, and another, and another. Suddenly, she remembered her mother. Sylvia tried to get out of the garden into the street, but it wasn't easy. She had to climb over a broken wall. She couldn't climb in her evening shoes. She took them off and carried them in her hand. She got up to the top of the wall and fell down into the street. Her pretty dress was dirty now, and she had cuts on her feet. There were people everywhere. They ran up and down the street and screamed. Some people tried to pull the rubble away from a building. "Come and help," one of them said to Sylvia. "My little boy's under there. Help me, please." "I'm sorry," said Sylvia. "I have to find my mother." There were cars everywhere too. Everybody wanted to get away from the buildings and out into the country. "Stop! Take me with you! Take me home!" she screamed at them. But they didn't hear her. They didn't stop. "I'll have to walk," she thought. "It's a long way, but I can do it. I have to go home and help my mother. I have to." Sylvia began to run. It wasn't easy. There was rubble across the road. A roof fell to the ground behind her. A wall suddenly fell in front of her. She climbed over it and started to run again. It wasn't dark now. The sky was red and black with fires and thick black smoke. Sylvia had only one idea in her head. There was nobody with her mother. She was ill in her bed. She couldn't move easily. Perhaps she was hurt. Perhaps she was... No, thought Sylvia. She's not dead. Oh, please, no, please. She's all right. I know she is. Mother, Mother. She was in the centre of town now. She looked round the square. There were some houses, and the big church clock showed the right time. But the hotel next to it was only a ruin. The plaza was in the same square. For the first time, Sylvia stopped and watched. Firemen and policemen carried people out of the cinema. "What happened?" she asked a girl. "The roof fell," the girl said. "Hundreds of people are dead." Perhaps Gabriel didn't go, thought Sylvia. Or perhaps he came too late, or... She didn't want to think about Gabriel now. The idea was too terrible. The Delgados' building was near the town centre, at the end of a street. Sylvia began to run again. She could see a big fire. She could hear people screaming. The building next to the Delgados' home was a ruin. Men and women pulled at the rubble. Sylvia knew them. They were her neighbours. They wanted to find their families and friends. But the Delgados' building was there. There was a big crack in the front wall and some windows were broken, but the building looked safe. "Hey, don't go in there," a man called to Sylvia. "It's too dangerous." But Sylvia didn't stop. She pushed open the door and went in. Inside it was dark. She tried the lights, but they didn't work. Quickly, she ran up the stairs to the flat. The front door was open. "Mother," she called. "Are you all right? It's me. Mother, where are you?" She went to her mother's bedroom. The door was open, but there was nobody in the bed. Mrs. Delgado wasn't there.